Deepfake images of children being made and distributed on X is deeply disturbing. What was once confined to the dark corners of the internet is now appearing on one of the world's largest social media platforms.
They keep saying, don't regulate us, you don't understand what we do, you can trust us. And what Musk has just proved, again, is you can't trust him. The idea that you can trust him to put safety measures in place, absolutely not. The only thing that's going to control these companies is government regulation.
What's gone wrong with the world is that the tech bros have sort of won in terms of who decides what matters. These are massive philosophical questions about the future of the human race. And yet they get to decide what the game is, what the rules are, and who should be the winner.
Welcome to The Rest is Politics Question Time with me, Rory Stewart.
And me, Alastair Campbell. And Rory, I hate talking about Elon Musk because the guy's a complete monstrosity on so many levels, but I think we must. Miranda is a Trip Plus member from Sussex. X is currently facing an epidemic where users tag Grok under women's posts and ask it to generate images of them undressed, which it does with alarming realism. Should there be new laws to regulate this kind of generative AI, or is it up to Musk and the tech companies to police themselves? Dan in Swansea, we've got a lot of questions on this week. I'm a father of two. This recent story about deepfake images of children being made and distributed on X is deeply disturbing. What was once confined to the dark corners of the internet is now appearing on one of the world's largest social media platforms. How is this legal? Is the government doing enough to combat it?
Just quickly on the story. Elon Musk launched Grok. A lot of it derived from its relationship with X, or what used to be Twitter, as a rival to the other big large language models, as a rival to ChatGPT that people will know, or Gemini, which is the Google platform, or Claude. And one of the reasons he did it very fast is that he got rid of almost all the people working on safety and content moderation. In fact, he doesn't really have set safety things that you can analyze. With the result that with Grok, unlike the others, you can type in, will you please take this photograph of Alastair Campbell and show him a picture of me, in a bikini or with no clothes on. And then you can post it up on X and you can share it around. Not surprisingly, this became a vile way of creating deep fake pseudo-pornographic images, initially of adults, then of children, which were then shared all over the internet. This is unbelievable. I mean, it's completely illegal, obviously, with child images, and with adults, it is profoundly psychologically distressing, humiliating. So, the British government, but not just the British government, also the Malaysian government, the Indonesian government, the Indian government, began to challenge this, and Elon Musk, being Elon Musk, pushed back and said, this is free speech, and the definition of a fascist state is one that wishes to put down on free speech. He tried to make a joke out of it by posting images of himself in a bikini. And when the British government finally stepped up, and Ofcom decided it was going to mount an investigation, the only real concession that Musk has made is to say the ability to create a deep fake pornographic images of private citizens will be reserved to the paying clients of Grok instead of being available to all the cheap users.
He monetizes it even more.
Absolutely. I first came across this because he was boasting on X last week that Grok was the fastest downloaded of all the large language model apps. And I thought that's a bit odd, because in many ways, Grok isn't actually performing at the level that Gemini and ChatGPT is. Why is it the fastest loading app? And obviously the reason it was the fastest loading app is everybody suddenly discovered in a few hours that they could ask it to take the clothes off women or men or children or whatever they were doing.
Yeah. Ofcom are looking into it. I hope they look into it with more vigour and rigour than they've been looking into GB News. And my sense of Musk is that he's constantly seeking to overreach. I mean, I know he's got this thing about Keir Starmer, and he's had it ever since the Southport killings. And he's getting, he sort of runs out of hate speech to throw at him. So he's now on the sort of fascist thing. I would argue that we've seen more fascism in America in recent days and weeks, not least in Minnesota, than we have in the UK. And while we're on Musk and Trump, by the way, Rory, I note today that the homicide rates in London are at their lowest for God knows how long, as this hellhole image that the American MAGA seem to put of London gets debunked yet again. But I think on this, it was interesting yesterday, Kemi Badenoch saying that the Conservatives would go down the Australian route of banning social media for under 16-year-olds. My Fiona said the other day, do you think the world would really be any worse if Twitter didn't exist anymore? I don't think it would.
Well, no, I think it would be dramatically better, Alastair. I was at a talk recently by one of these tech billionaires who said, can you imagine how terrible our lives were before smartphones? And I was thinking,
no.
With Shoshana, no, our lives are pretty I can't think our lives are terrible for that. Listen, I'm actually really sad that despite you and me banging the drum hard on Peter Malinowskis, that the Labour government didn't embrace this. And well done, Kemi Badenoch. But it's yet another example of Keir Starmer being leaden-footed and missing a chance. Banning social media access for under-16s is the correct thing to do.
Yeah, I think it will happen eventually. The thing about this, though, is that I was talking to my friend Jim in the swimming pool the other day. He made a really interesting point, I thought. He said, what's gone wrong with the world is that the tech bros have sort of won in terms of who decides what matters and who decides what works in the attention economy. And we've lost any sense of the importance of historians and philosophers and social scientists.
This episode is brought to you by Fuse Energy.
And we are, as you all know, in January, and that's when everyone starts optimizing food, fitness, finances, everything, except the thing charging on the drive at home.
Because most EV owners are overpaying without realizing it. They're either charging at the wrong time or on the wrong tariff. A smart EV charger changes that by aligning how you charge with how electricity is priced.
Fuse sets you up with a smart charger linked to an EV tariff, so your car charges overnight, automatically, when electricity is at its cheapest.
That can mean as little as 16 pence per kilowatt hour, compared to 24 pence or more on a standard tariff. You don't manage it manually. Fuse does that for you with everything visible in the app.
Fuse will install it in one visit, then take care of the tariff and smart charging, so the car is ready when you are. With the right setup, EV driving can cost under 3p per mile.
Getting the electric car was the big decision. A smart EV charger is the easy one. Visit fuseenergy.com/EV.
This debate, this goes back to your series on AI. The sorts of questions that you and Matt Clifford have been raising actually shouldn't be decided by scientists and boffins and tech bros. These are massive philosophical questions about the future of the human race. And yet they get to decide what the game is, what the rules are, and who should be the winner at all times.
Absolutely. And they keep saying, don't regulate us. You don't understand what we do. You can trust us. And what Musk has just proved again this week is you can't trust him.
Correct.
The idea that you can trust him to put safety measures in place, absolutely not. The only thing that's going to control these companies is government regulation. But of course, they have now this incredible economic weight, these trillion-dollar companies that are essentially able to blackmail almost everybody. Why has Keir Starmer been slow to come out? I'm worried that it's partly that he doesn't want to fight with Donald Trump. And he's worried that all this, great investment coming in and these American tech companies building data centers will be put at risk if he challenges the domination of the tech bros.
And to be fair, he's probably right to be worried about that because we are so dependent in so many ways on America. I think one of the things we've learned in recent months is we've allowed ourselves over generations to become way too dependent on a power, the broad goodness of which we've taken for granted. We should have learned watching Boris Johnson. Once you get a good system trapped by a very, very bad man, then all sorts of bad stuff's going to happen. And I think that's where we are now. But listen, I would love it if Britain led the way in saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Musk, you may be very powerful, you may be the richest man in the world, but you are now actually a force for bad in the world. And insofar as we can limit your influence within the United Kingdom, we are going to do it. What that would mean in practical terms, I don't know, because I'm not as savvy on this stuff as you are. But I actually think we are moving to a place of saying these people have got to be confronted with the consequences of the badness that they do on so many levels, just to get richer and richer and richer.
I'm with you 100%, 100%. James Coughlin, does the reaction to the ICE murder, so this is the horrible killing of this woman in Minnesota by an ICE agent, show we are in a misinformation age? And just quickly, I don't think with an issue like this, hardly anyone in the world will have missed it. Yes, he's right, it's a misinformation age because of the awful way in which Vance and Trump and others responded, which we can get into. But it's also an information age because the reason we know they're all lying is that we have this incredible depth of cell phone footage showing the killing from different angles and clearly demonstrating that here is a 37-year-old mother in a car reversing in order to drive off while an ICE officer tries to pull at the handle. And apparently, because she went, well, certainly every angle demonstrates she's not running over the ICE agent. An ICE agent steps forward and shoots her through the window. The car then crashes because she's been killed. Over to you.
Well, Jamie Coughlin's question, does it show that we're in a misinformation age? Absolutely it does, because Rory, you just said something very interesting. You said that when you look at all the videos from every angle, it's perfectly obvious that she was trying to get away and not threatening, etc., etc., etc. I've just watched a video put out by the Department of Homeland Security where a young woman in a blue dress is standing there speaking on behalf of the American government, explaining the exact opposite of what you've said. She says these videos clearly show that this guy was under attack from a domestic terrorist. So yes, we're in a misinformation age, and we're in a misinformation age where the misinformation is led by the elected president of the United States. And by the way, Roy, I mentioned earlier about the sort of difference between crime and the use of guns in America compared to here. Do you know that every year in the USA, law enforcement authorities kill somewhere between 1,300 and 1,400 people? In Britain, it is 2 per year. 3 a day in America, 2 per year here. So on one level, we look at it, and because there's such a focus on ICE, there's such a focus on Trump, we maybe think this is kind of truly shocking, which it is, but actually it happens there more than we realize. But what this showed was that because ICE are identified as Trump's thing, although they were created by a previous president, but Trump has massively invested in them. He's made immigration his big thing. And they were obviously long. And when you first saw the first footage of this guy just shooting at the car, and then it emerged that she was white, she was middle class, she sort of went against the agenda. Then I made the mistake of turning on to see what Fox News were making of it. I mean, they were finding anything to attack her. So one of them was out there saying, really objection, she had pronouns in her bio. It's not just that we're in a misinformation age. We're in an age where every single thing by this American government is twisted in its favor for the narrative it's trying to promote at that time.
It's worth maybe just taking a little time to remind people what Vance said. So most people now, I think, will have seen this video. And what quite clearly happens in this video is a woman is rather slowly backing her car back in order to drive off. And this is Vance's statement.
That very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? That woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job.
You have a woman who is trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that. The reason this woman is dead is because she tried to ram somebody with her car, and the guy acted in self-defense. You've got to be a little brainwashed to get to the point where you're willing to get to the point of throwing your vehicle in front of legitimate law enforcement officers and driving your car into them. What I'm certain of is the officer had every reason to think that he was under very serious threat of injury or, in fact, his life. What I'm certain of is that she accelerated in a way where she ran into the guy.
My son, he sent me a message after watching that. He said, why is it every time I hear JD Vance, I want to take a shower? I mean, JD Vance, I think it was Scaramucci who said this, JD Vance lives to say what he thinks Donald Trump is going to watch him saying on television. And I think that's what we had there. Tom Homan, the Homeland Security guy, he actually came out and his very first words were, this has just happened. Let's take time. Let's try to investigate what the facts are. Okay. Within no time at all, he'd clearly been bollocked, and he went out and said, it's quite clear she did this, she did that, she did the other. And this goes to the heart of something we talked about with Baroness Hale. Once you don't have an acceptance that law enforcement authorities work within the law, and you have an acceptance that we should be entitled to know who they are and why they're asking us to cooperate with them in their duties of law enforcement. And once you don't have a place where we can all accept this is a fact, rather than that is something that's happened and I will express as a fact my opinion of what it means, which is what Vance was doing, eventually we don't have a democracy. And I think that's the road that they're on in America.
It's also the total lack of separation between the executive, the president, the vice president, and these ICE officers. I mean, if you think about it, if it had happened in the United Kingdom, a police officer had shot a woman in her car, you would not have had the entire cabinet, doesn't matter whether they're Conservative or Labour, immediately going out on the air saying, this woman is a vile terrorist who was accelerating and ramming an officer. I'm absolutely certain that everything the officer did was entirely legitimate. It's a sign of a sickness that's got into the system. It's not just the lies, it's the fact that they're not even taking that second that Tom Homan is trying to take to say, well, the thing that you know and all of us know. I mean, if I came to you and said, Alastair, look, there's been a story about this, what do we say? Your immediate reaction, presumably in Downing Street, would be to say, well, we don't know very much. Let's wait and try to find out what the facts are. You know, presumably what you normally say is, this sounds like an absolute tragedy. We're looking very carefully at the situation. A full, police investigation will be conducted, etc. No?
Well, what happens in Britain, I think by law, is that as soon as an incident like this happens, it is automatically referred to those who investigate the police conduct. It's is the opposite of what's happened in the state, where they have decided. To go back to my point about Musk, they decide the game, they decide the rules, they decide the good guys and the bad guys, and they've decided based on the opposite of what they see with their eyes. They've decided she's the bad guy. The guy who killed her is the good guy. Vance even said at the end of that shower-inducing speech that you refer to, he even said we should thank him for his service and we should pray for him. I think pray for the kids of the woman, pray for the family that's just lost their mother. You use the word sick. It is sick. And I'll tell you, I think what the sickness is. Trump goes on about Venezuela being a narco state. The real narco state is the United States. And the real narc is the narcissism that he represents and that all these people around him feed at every level. They feed it rather than ever challenge it.
We did an episode on ICE, but part of the problem is that these guys have been deliberately recruited with extremely unpleasant, frequently pseudo-racist images. They're encouraged to swagger around masked. They're bringing in very, very rapidly. It's a massively expanding budget. So they're recruiting far too many people without proper checks. They're encouraging this incredibly aggressive culture. And they're signaling that they're exempt from the law. They're signaling that the Department of Justice won't prosecute them if they do stuff. They're telling them they don't have to reveal their faces or say who they are. And imagine the kind of person who wants to join that kind of organization. So you've got the wrong culture right from the beginning.
I've decided, by the way, I'm not going to the World Cup. I've made a decision on that, Rory. I just don't want to go.
No. Really?
Yeah, I have.
No, you've got to. Scotland's qualified, Alastair. You've got to go.
Lots of people will go, and there'll be lots of Scots in America will go. But I don't want to go and sort of, I just don't want to. I just feels like it's not a place to go right now. I mean, I go out of curiosity, but not. I don't want to go to have a good time. And we were with some American friends last night, and they were saying it's just horrible living there at the moment. They all know people who think like this, and they say it's becoming impossible to live alongside each other.
Have you followed that he's now announced the prosecution of the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell?
Oh, exactly. That's a classic. There's a guy. This is a guy whose job is to try and keep inflation low, keep the economy on an even keel. And Trump tells him that he's a dunderhead, he's an idiot, he's stupid, and he should be cutting interest rates because that's what Trump would do. So they're pretending that he's sort of broken the law in relation to the funding of refurbishment of the headquarters, as if he gives a damn. And he's being subpoenaed. And he's absolutely come out and called it for what it is. This is them basically saying, unless you do in an independent job what the president tells you to, then they will find a way of prosecuting you. Well, I mean, that is, I don't care what anybody says, that is a major seed of fascism. 100%. Well, look, we trust our listeners and viewers a lot. Maybe we should do one of our instant polls about whether I should go to the World Cup or not.
Good idea.
But at the moment, I'm very settled against it. It would have to be a landslide in favour for me to change my mind.
Can I just remind listeners that your massively puritanical instincts, where you're going to lecture Alastair, try to think about yourself and his situation. If you really, really loved football and Scotland had finally qualified for the World Cup, will you be giving the same advice?
You look over my shoulder, you'll see a picture of Scott McTominay's goal against Denmark.
So let's get the answers from the poll. I'm in favour of you travelling.
Now, Rory, I know you're in Syria and you've been travelling a fair bit. But there is a question here from Louise McAnally, who wants to know why the right-wing press is currently kicking lumps out of Rory Stewart. Are you aware that you're having lumps kicked out of you? Are you aware that the former Prime Minister, no less, devoted his Mail on Sunday column to asking why you are, I think he called you a bedwetting lefty. You're leading the bedwetting lefties of the world in opposing Trump's triumphant stance in Iran and Venezuela.
You pointed out to me just before we came on air that there's also been a big article in the Spectator saying I'm a complete idiot and get everything wrong, and the Telegraph saying the same thing.
The Telegraph said that Rory Stewart is wrong about everything, but he gets away with it because he's posh, which is a really weird thing for the Telegraph to say, because the Telegraph normally loves posh people being wrong and saying that they're right. So I think maybe they're just worried that you're associating with other lefties of a non-bedwetting variety, Rory, such as my dear self. But listen, it looked a bit organised to me because if you think about it, Johnson, Spectator, Telegraph, we're talking about the axis of evil here.
I triggered something bad. So I triggered it partly, I think, from a very aggressive interview with Michael Gove, which may have meant that the editor of The Spectator was not feeling very well disposed towards me.
I thought you were quite gentle.
Boris Johnson is not a great fan, because amongst the predictions that I've made, my prediction that Boris Johnson would be a terrible prime minister, I think, was massively vindicated. The core of it actually was the fight with Dominic Cummings, who, for international listeners, was briefly Boris Johnson's chief of staff and was the architect of the Brexit referendum campaign, who put this sign on the side of buses claiming completely falsely that we were losing £350 million a week in our EU membership. And I challenged him about a claim he'd made saying that the UAE had cut funding for students in Britain because they were worried about the Muslim Brotherhood. He turned out to be right. I was wrong. So I tweeted, "You were right, Dominic. I was wrong."
Oh.
And then I apologized. Now,
Rory, hold on.
Yeah.
Before you go on from that. So you said, "You were right, I was wrong." I mean, I've had a few interesting exchanges with Dominic Cummings about Brexit. He's yet to say, "You were right, I was wrong" about that one, and to apologise for his role in that, even though it has turned out to be the biggest crock of shit since I don't know what.
The very weird thing about this is that we all get things wrong. I get a lot of things wrong. Dominic Cummings gets a lot of things wrong. You get things wrong. I mean, we all get things wrong because we're engaged in trying to predict very uncertain futures. Some things I get right? I mean, Peter Sutherland walked around with a piece of paper on which I predicted that the Brexit referendum would be won 52-48, 6 weeks before the referendum. Now, am I pleased with that? No, obviously not. I was lucky. How did I know it was going to be 152-48 a few weeks out? All we really have about the world is probabilities. And it's really difficult. That's why the polling companies keep getting elections wrong. But we're surrounded with a world where everybody assumes, because they never remember what they got wrong, that they're right about everything. I was talking to someone recently who said to me that he'd got off a plane in Ghana, and as soon as he'd met the first taxi driver, he knew which way the election was going to go. Never been to Ghana before. And he was vindicated. The election went in the direction, and the ambassador in Ghana was wrong. Right? And I just thought, for God's sake, but you hear this all the time. Everyone's like, I knew Trump was going to win. I knew Brexit was going to go here.
You knew Trump wasn't going to win. That's part of your problem with this.
I knew Trump wasn't going to win. Absolutely. So I think the best one can do, given that one can't predict the future, and that's actually a fundamental problem for AI too, it can't predict the future, is when you guess it wrong, to try to analyze how you got it wrong. So why did I get it wrong on Kamala Harris? I got it wrong because I believed that young African-American voters were not going to turn out and vote, and they did. And then try to understand what it is about me that made me underestimate what was going on, and then try to do better next time. But is that not the world?
No.
I mean, the world is, if I challenge Elon Musk and say, for example, as I have, Britain is not in a civil war. Britain isn't in a civil war, incidentally. I think I'm right on that, and Musk is wrong. Immediately, 1,000 people come in on Twitter and say, I'd rather believe Elon Musk than you, Rory. You're wrong about everything. And I was trying to say, is it possible Elon Musk isn't right about everything? Is it possible Dominic Cummings isn't right about everything? Is it possible Boris Johnson isn't right about everything? Possible Nigel Farage is right? No, absolutely not. The right is right about absolutely everything, and the left is consistently wrong.
Yeah, no, well, that's, I'm afraid, is the sort of polarized social media world that we're in. But it did look like a sort of concerted little event. I wouldn't let it worry your head, Rory. I really wouldn't. I'm pleased you didn't even know about the Boris Johnson one.
Do you think it might affect my return to Conservative politics? Do you think that there's a tone there that suggests I may not be very welcome back?
I think probably not. But the Conservative Party is, of course, has become a very different beast. And they've lost another one, by the way. Nadhim Zahawi has defected to Reform now.
Which is a mistake from Reform.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Given that Reform's line was supposed to be, we're not Boris Johnson's Tories. We're not what they did on COVID. We're not what they did on austerity. We're not the way they managed the country. To hire Boris Johnson's big champion.
Well, even when we interviewed Nadhim Zahawi, when he was out of government and Johnson was out of government and out of politics, he still defended him to the hilt. And also what happens, I'm afraid I can see this ending quite badly for Nadhim Zahawi, because what will happen now is that the scandals around him that kind of got quietly forgotten as the Tories sort of faded into opposition, they're now going to come back and haunt him. And as a result, they will haunt, even though our press doesn't want to do anything that damages Nigel Farage, they will damage Nigel Farage as well. So I agree with you. I think it's a mistake on both counts.
They also took Nadine Dorris, who was, as we discovered when we did the election coverage, adores Boris and believes he's come from a disadvantaged background and rose to great things.
Yeah.
They took Danny Kruger, who was Boris Johnson's chief of staff. There's something very interesting going on there about why they want to bring the Boris Johnson tribute acts into Reform.
Well, if you look at if you're a sort of opportunistic politician of the right, you look at the opinion polls at the moment, you think, well, the Tories have finished. The only chance of getting into power are Reform. Nigel Farage has got this reputation of being a one-man band. He's tried to bring in somebody like Tice, Zia Youssef, 2 or 3 others to say he's not a one-man band. But then he can expand it further by bringing these other people. But the trouble is they're all Tory rejects and retreads. They're the thing that Farage said he was fighting against rather than fighting to simply to sort of be a sort of poor substitute of. So from their point of view, I can see why he wants to grow, but he should be actually be getting more people from outside the political tent. He's not really getting anybody who's not a conventional politician. So these people, and you haven't mentioned, Anne Widdecombe and others like that, they are thinking this is their only way back into the political front line. So that's obvious why they're doing it. But I think you're right. I think it's damaging to them. I think it's a big mistake. Well, look, shall we? Have we talked enough about Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson? I think we probably have.
I think we have, and I don't know whether. It's just an interesting question whether it was a concerted attack. It was a pretty amazing thing, though, to suddenly notice that 3 really big right-wing newspapers on the same day are running headlines with Rory Stewart. Not in a positive way, not in a way that my mother would like headlines about Rory Stewart.
You don't want to be a lefty bedwetter, Rory. That's not what you want to be.
Not sure I necessarily want to be wrong about everything and only listen to because I'm posh either. I mean, that doesn't sound that great.
No, you don't want that. But neither of those things are true. You're not wrong about everything. You've been wrong about some things, but you've been right about a lot of things as well. I, as you say, am occasionally wrong. I got something wrong in the Where is Moldova quiz at the airport the other day. I was shocked to do that, but only once. We should say, just on Moldova, I really do recommend people listen to Maya Sandu, the president of Moldova, the latest episode of Leading. I think she's unbelievably impressive. Really impressive.
And that was such a great trip. It was one of the, listeners don't necessarily get to go along with us on these trips, but I think the 2 great trips I've done with you, Syria and Moldova, was really, really wonderful.
Yeah, they were both good. And I'm not really into wine, but anybody who's into wine, go and visit those wineries. They were something else. I saw you were very tempted to see whether you could nick Hermann Goering's wine collection. That bottle of wine.
Well, it didn't look like they were looking after everyone. I also, slightly traumatically, did I tell you that I discovered that Hermann Goering was the same age that I am now, 53, when he went on the Nuremberg trials? It's making me feel very aged because Goering doesn't look that young in my memory of him. It's a real sign of aging that
no.
Goering's my age.
Yeah, but think of it, you're also the same age as Maya Sandu. I think you're a year older than her, so that's a better comparison.
That's true.
She's young with a whole future ahead of her.
Now, Alastair, you wanted a bit of class warfare, so here's an opportunity.
No, I didn't.
Comes from Melbourne, where there's a little bit of class warfare going on. What do you make of one Cambridge college's new policy to specifically target elite private schools for recruitment? Is it really about academic quality, or is it to ensure the next generation of deep-pocketed alumni remain firmly within their walls? So, Alistair, that's a trifecta. That's Australia, that's Cambridge, and that's posh private school people at Cambridge. which was your dominant experience at Cambridge. Go on, tell us about this.
Well, you say I want class war. I don't want class war. I want an end to class war. And the class war that is revealed in this policy at Trinity Hall College is the class war that says that if you are from one of these very expensive private schools full of very privileged people with parents who expect their children to be every bit as successful as they have been, that is the real class war. The reason I was so angry about this, and this is a letter that went out from Trinity Hall, Cambridge, to 50 private schools, including Eton, Winchester, St Paul's, saying they wanted more applications from these sorts of schools in languages, music, classics, art, history, and theology. And they actually said that they worried that children from private schools were being ignored and marginalised because of reverse discrimination. The idea that you can say that private school kids are ignored and marginalised within our Oxbridge system is utterly, totally ridiculous. 7% of kids go to private school, and 29% of Cambridge's 2024 intake was private school. Trinity Hall, 26%, down from 32% in 2022. So I just think this whole thing is basically about saying we want to keep the broad social, cultural class system as it is, and we're fed up of these working class oiks being foisted upon us from comprehensive schools.
I mean, does that make sense, really, for the kind of Trinity Hall's admissions tutor? And I can't imagine the Trinity Hall admissions tutor saying, what I really want to do is keep the working class oiks in their place.
No, they don't necessarily think like that, but I think that's where the thinking comes from. That if you come from a very privileged background, you are of necessity going to be a better student, cleverer, more intelligent. And I think the opposite is the case. I think the fact of schools, some Cambridge colleges and Oxford colleges having gone out and admitted, we talked, earlier about admitting when you're wrong, admitted that they've just relied too much on this sense of, well, there's the posh rich kids, get more of them in year after year after year. Hold on a minute. Why don't we go and try and find some really clever kids in schools that don't even apply? I think that's been good for the schools and it's been good for Oxbridge.
To defend Cambridge a bit, I suspect that when you were at Cambridge, the vast majority of people have been to private school. And by the time I was at that age, I think it was probably 50% of the Cambridge intake was private school. They've now dropped it down to just over a quarter. So I think you've got to admit things are going the right direction, aren't they? And that's because exactly as you say, they've been out there doing really good jobs, reaching out.
Right. That's why I think this is worrying, because it's trying to take us back. It's trying to take us back in the old direction. That's why I don't like this. And it's based upon an assumption.
I assume, I'm trying to make up a defense. I have no idea what they think they're doing. It seems a bit weird to me, because I'm not sure that Eton or Winchester or St Paul's needs much help in being encouraged to apply to Oxbridge.
Exactly.
So I don't know what's going on. One possibility is that the cut of funding for languages and classics and art
and music
in schools, in state schools, means that they're struggling to bring in people in those specific fields. So they need people to study Latin and Greek. They need people to study languages. They need people to study art. And maybe what's happening here is they're struggling now to find people coming in who have done any Latin at all.
When I read it, I felt that is the one argument I could have bought, is if they said that because of state cuts, state funding being cut in some of these areas, because there is this dearth of kids now learning languages in the way that they used to, which is, I've admitted, back to admitting when you get things wrong, I think was one of the mistakes we made. It was no longer compulsory to have to learn a foreign language. I think that was a mistake. So they may be saying that, but they don't say that. They say that going to these schools, they're more aligned with what we're trying to do with our education. And more aligned, to me, means basically saying they want more people like us. But social mobility should mean something in Britain. As soon as I saw this, I thought this is an attempt to reverse progress in social mobility. And by the way, Rory, there is we talk about the old boys club, right? And we all know what that means. That's the 7%. People should join something called the 93% club. I'm a member. I recommend everybody who went to state school joins the 93% club.
It also seems from the outside sort of slightly insane. I mean, whatever this...
Hold on a minute. Back to your point about the sort of the right-wing media attacks on you. The right wing came out and completely supported it. You know, the Spectator was full of stuff.
What did they say? What was their defense?
Well, they basically said that the reverse discrimination, as they call it, makes private school pupils feel unwanted. Bursary students, they're likely to be discouraged from applying. That Trinity Hall has been falling in the league tables, as if that's got something to do with the fact that they've only got 1 in 4 private school kids as opposed to other colleges which may have more. I mean, the thing is a complete nonsense. Anyway, I hope I've not been too unkind to Trinity Hall, but the problem with this country, Rory, let me tell you the problem with this country. We've never actually tried comprehensive education. We've never actually done fully comprehensive education. That is the problem with this country.
Isn't that what the left always says? The problem is we've never really tried communism. We've never done it properly. Okay, here we go.
Oh, God. Well, you want to leave this with me being a communist. I am not a communist.
Right. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Have a nice time in Syria.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.